You're listening to the DVM Podcast Empire.
Now with over 1 million downloads.
1 million downloads.
Find us online at DVMPE.com.
100% free.
1,000,000% fan.
And now,
Push the button.
Is it possible that we have permitted ideology, political and economic philosophies, and governmental policies to keep us from considering the very real, everyday problems of our people?
So what if my feelings are hurt? Does that give me the right to prevent others from expressing their opinions?
Wait a second, Doc! Are you telling me that this sucker is nuclear?
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Mr. Anderson.
Don't push it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the latest episode of Push the Button, your number one podcast for all things that get you hot. I am your host, David Vox Mullen, a man of many talents.
And I am your other host, Mr. Anderson.
And today, we are going to be celebrating a brand new year. This is our first podcast of 2015. And we thought it'd be neat to kind of go back and touch on some of the controversial issues of 2014. But before we get into that, we're going to kind of recap on our previous episode. We talked about the famous 10 Commandments. And Ken, you mentioned that you found something else out over the week.
There is a third set of 10 Commandments in the Bible.
Another set?
Go figure!
Oh, my word.
They're actually found in, I believe, in Deuteronomy. I don't have it in front of me. Because just as we were getting ready to go live here, I just thought about this, and I figured I should probably put this out there. But there is another set, and an entirely different story. And Moses, in this story, tells the people on Mount Horeb, I believe, that, hey, God spoke to us and just said this, and gives the 10 Commandments that everybody's familiar with. And then he says God himself inscribed the tablets, which is different from the other two stories that we've gotten.
Right.
And to me, it's just like, really? Like, and nobody can find any contradictions in this book. I love when I hear people say, like, I've read the Bible from cover to cover, and I don't see any contradictions in it whatsoever.
First of all, I don't understand how anybody would even do that. They would sit down and go, okay, let's start with Genesis, and then just read straight through, when it's literally just a collection of different works.
Well, it's so repetitive. I mean, how would you?
I can honestly say I have read the entire Bible, but never in any order and never in one sitting. It's always been through the last 37 years, different books, different chapters, here and there. But yeah, I couldn't. And I've heard people say, I decided I'd figure out the Bible, so I sit down, I'd start with Genesis, and I just started reading, and I was like, wow, I could never do that. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I couldn't handle that.
Well, that's actually what I did with the Old Testament, the Torah.
I don't know how you got past the book of Exodus from the book of Genesis. I mean, it's just this guy begat this guy begat this guy. It's like, really? I don't need all this.
Right. And there's so much repetition. Like, when there's a spot in, I can't remember which book it is in the Torah, but he basically says, like, if you do this, I will visit suffering upon 7 generations, and he just keeps repeating itself for, it's just like 20 chapters of nothing but God basically threatening everybody. Like, if you do this, I'm gonna visit 7 generations of suffering. Anyway, so I just wanted to throw that out there. There is another set of 10 Commandments in the Bible. So there's 3. We get 3 different sets.
Yeah, and I'm looking, and I think that's Deuteronomy chapter 5.
Yes.
And I'm seeing, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the 3rd and 4th generation, and those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals. You got to make sure those animals don't do any work, bro.
Or you got to kill them. Or you have to kill them.
Let's see here. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Okay, so yeah, that's the same ones that we assumed was the original ones, right? The first ones that were written down that Moses destroyed.
Right, but again, it was never stated that those were 10 commandments. It's just those were the first 10 in a line of 200.
Right. Let's see here.
And it never says in Exodus, when it first talks about Moses going up onto Mount Sinai alone, speaking with God, and God specifically says nobody else can come up here, just you.
Right.
But then he says one other person. I think he says Aaron can come up. Mm-hmm. But later on, like I've said before, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but Aaron was down at the base of the mountain worshiping idols with the people while Moses was up on the mountain. So
yeah, the only thing that says 10 Commandments is the chapter name. So
that was inserted. That was inserted at a later date.
Right, exactly. Yep. So the only thing that specifies that these were commandments is at the end of that, God says, these are the commandments, or no, Moses says, these are the commandments the Lord proclaimed in a loud voice to your whole assembly there on the mountain from out of the fire, the cloud, and the deep darkness, and he added nothing more.
Right, and that's Deuteronomy. That's
right.
The third set. That's the third set of commandments, and the difference in that story is that it says there that God actually spoke to everyone. In the other stories, it was only Moses and Aaron, maybe, we're not sure, but nobody else was allowed up on that mountain. But in that third story, hey, everybody gathered around and God spoke to everyone.
Yeah.
So it's just no contradiction there whatsoever.
Yeah, and in Deuteronomy it goes on to say that the leaders of the tribes all came up and said, "We heard God, His voice. We saw His glory and His majesty, and we have heard His voice from the fire. Today we have seen that a person can live even if God speaks with them." Interesting. No, because their belief at that time was that if God speaks to them, you'd die. Okay. Anyway, so that's very interesting, Ken. Good.
That's very loving. He's
good,
very loving.
Good catch, man. Good catch.
So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there for everybody who... I don't like to give misinformation. I don't like to give incomplete information either.
Right. No, it's very cool. Very cool. So
I should say we don't like to give.
I specifically love giving misinformation. Anything I can do to confuse our audience, that's my goal.
Yeah, that's the goal of this podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
We're just teasing. Now, let me tell you what. We are going to be talking about some of the most controversial issues of last year, because that's what we do, man. We love controversy. One of the top 10 controversies of 2014, and this, of course, was according to a CNN.com poll, because if it's a CNN.com poll, it must be right. And
anything on the internet is true.
Yes, and you know who said that? Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I was not aware of that.
So we'll mention, I'll go down the list of the top 10, starting with number 10, the Boko Haram organization. And just to educate people who may not be familiar, Boko Haram basically translates Western education is forbidden. Officially called Jama'atu Achilles Sunnah Lidwa Awati Wal Jihad. Translated in English to people committed to the Prophet's teachings for propagation and jihad. Apparently there's no translation for the word jihad, although I think it's holy war. It's a terrorist, militant, and Islamic movement based in the northeast Nigeria with additional activities in Chad, Niger, and Cameroon. The group is led by Abu Bakr Shekau.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah. And the number of fighters is usually estimated at around 9,000. The group is designated as a terrorist organization by New Zealand, Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, the United States, and the United Nations Security Council, which declared it an Al-Qaeda affiliate and imposed the Al-Qaeda sanctions regime on the group. So as of right now, Boko Haram has been reported as killing more than 5,000 civilians between July of 2009 and June of 2014, including at least 2,000 in the first half of 2014, in attacks occurring mainly in northeast, north central, and central Nigeria. Corruption in the security services and human rights abuses committed by them have hampered efforts to counter the unrest. Since 2009, Boko Haram have abducted more than 500 men, women, and children, including the famous kidnapping of 276 schoolgirls from Chibok in April of 2014. 650,000 people had fled the conflict zone by August of 2014, and it's an increase of 200,000 since May by the end of the year. 1.5 million have fled. After its founding in 2002, Boko Haram's increasing radicalization led to a violent uprising in July of 2009, in which its leader was actually executed. Its unexpected resurgence following a mass prison break in September of 2010 was accompanied by an increasingly sophisticated attacks, initially against soft targets, and progressing in 2011 to include suicide bombings on police buildings and the United Nations office in Abuja. The government's establishment of a state of emergency at the beginning of 2012, extended in the following year to cover the entire northeast of the country, resulted in a marked increase in both security force abuses and militant attacks. The Nigerian military proved ineffective in countering the insurgency, hampered by an entrenched culture of official corruption. Since mid-2014, the militants have been in control of swaths of territory in and around their home state of Borno, but have not captured the capital of Borno State, Maiduguri, where the group was originally based. As of January, as of this month, 2015, Boko Haram controlled towns and villages across about 20,000 square miles, an area the size of Belgium, in the states of Borno and Yobe. Wow. So that is the number 10 out of the top 10 controversial issues. So we have a terrorist group in Africa, basically a division of Al-Qaeda. Now, I don't know if we have evidence that they are affiliated with Al-Qaeda, or we're just calling them an affiliate of Al-Qaeda so we can impose sanctions against them.
Yeah, I don't know. It
would make sense either way, but...
They say that they received training from Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula.
Did you say the McRib?
The McRib, yes. The McRib.
You know, the thing about the McRib is every time it's back, it's like, oh, man, I can't believe it's back. I've missed it. And then I try one, and then I remember why I don't eat them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It always leaves me like, ugh.
That's it. You're kicked off the podcast.
Listen, when it comes out, I get excited. But
this is the same guy, ladies and gentlemen, who frickin' loves White Castle.
Hey, I don't frickin' love White Castle. I can handle White Castle. I actually had White Castle.
Oh, wait a second here.
For the first time in a while.
first or second podcast, you were so excited. You and Father Nels were so excited about White Castle. Anyway.
I enjoy a slider or two. I used to be able to eat a lot, but yeah.
It disgusts me. No, but I do love McRibs. I could eat several of them in one sitting.
Extra onions and pickles. That's my.
You know what I really like? I know we're totally getting off topic.
No, I love that we're doing this, by the way, because this is what this group needs.
The cheddar melt is like my favorite McDonald's sandwich of all time.
Oh, I had that.
Now, I'll tell you, I get it without the onions because I hate onions. If onions were people, I would kill them. I hate onions, but you get that rye bun with the quarter pounder, with the cheddar cheese. That it's like whiz.
So there you go, McDonald's. If you ever wanted a show to sponsor, we're going to talk about terrorist organization in Africa, and we'll find a way to correlate that to McDonald's. So
how do we do that? I blame that on you. I'm not blaming
You can. So that was number 10.
And apparently, just for the record, the reason they kidnapped those girls was because the girls were being trained. They were being educated, basically, and we can't have that.
Right.
We cannot have women being educated in this world.
Yeah, Boko Haram means Western education is forbidden.
And I'll just say, as much as I hate it, as much as I think that's just absolutely ridiculous, it's none of our business to go in there and bomb the shit out of them to educate them.
As we have not.
But I do believe that we can try to educate them in other ways.
Sure.
I don't like when people say who are we to say that it's not okay to, have female genital mutilation or whatever. Well, I agree with you. I would say that it is our place because we know better. And, however, we can educate people. And, again, ignorance is not stupidity. Ignorance is just a lack of information, and ignorance is cured through education. So I believe there is a way that we can reach out to those people and try to educate them without bombing the hell out of them and without putting our people in harm's way.
Yeah.
Just makes sense.
No, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I have conversations with people who say, what about pacifism? What about, trying to talk? I'm like, look, if people are willing to talk, I'm all for talk. Absolutely. I mean, it's the basis of what you and I are doing. I'm all for talk. But when you attempt to talk and talk is done, or talk does not, or where talk fails, then pacifism has to go. It doesn't work. Because if it's going to be between your life or somebody else's life, it's not a choice.
Yeah, right.
So yes, I agree with pacifism to the point of communication and education. But if we can't have communication and education, then it comes down to I got to defend myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Moving on, the number 9. And again, we did not categorize these. This is what CNN.com did. So just for some people who may hear this and take offense that it's not a higher issue, but the number 9 would be the 2014 Israel-Gaza conflict. On July 8th, 2014, Israel launched a military operation which it designated Operation Protective Edge. Also in Hebrew, it's roughly translated to Operation Strong Cliff, in the Hamas-ruled Gaza Strip. Thereafter, 7 weeks of Israel bombardment, Palestine rocket attacks, and ground fighting killed more than 2,200 people, the vast majority of them Gazans. The stated aim of the Israeli operation was to stop rocket fire from Gaza into Israel, which increased after an Israeli crackdown on Hamas in the West Bank was launched following the kidnapping and murder of 3 Israeli teenagers by 2 Hamas members. I don't know if you remember those or not, but I do. On July 7th, after 7 Hamas militants died in a tunnel explosion in Khan Yunis, which was caused by an Israeli airstrike per Hamas, keeping in mind, or an accidental explosion of their own munitions, per the IDF, Hamas assumed responsibility for rockets fired from Gaza and launched 40 rockets towards Israel. The operation officially began the following day, and on July 17th, the operation was expanded to an Israeli ground invasion of Gaza, with the stated aim of destroying Gaza's tunnel system. Before I go on, there was a tunnel system that was created by the Gazans that literally went from Gaza underground into Israel so they could pop up in different various unknown locations and, follow through with their plans. Israeli ground forces withdrew on August 5th, and on August 26th, an open-ended ceasefire was announced. By this time, the IDF reported that Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other militant groups had fired 4,564 rockets and mortars from Gaza into Israel, while the IDF attacked 5,263 targets in Gaza. At least 34 known tunnels were destroyed, and 2/3 of Hamas's 10,000 rocket arsenal was used up or destroyed. A bomb disposal expert in the Palestinian Interior Ministry said that by August 22nd, 20,000 tons of explosives had been dropped on Gaza. Between 2,127 and 2,310 Gazans were killed, including 513 children, and between 10,895 and 11,100 were wounded. 66 Israeli soldiers, 5 Israeli civilians, including 1 child, and 1 Thai civilian were killed. And 469 IDF soldiers and 261 Israeli civilians were injured. The Gaza Health Ministry, UN, and some human rights groups reported that 69 to 75% of the Palestinian casualties were civilians. Israeli officials estimated that around 50% of those killed were civilians. On August 5th, OSHA stated that 520,000 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, that's about approximately 30% of its population, might have been displaced, of whom 485,000 needed emergency food assistance and 273,000 were taking shelter in 90 UN-run schools. 17,200 Gazan homes were totally destroyed or severely damaged, and 37,650 homes suffered damage but were still inhabitable. In Israel, an estimated 5,000 to 8,000 citizens temporarily fled their homes due to the threat of rocket and mortar attacks. Nearly 3,000 properties in Israel suffered direct damage from rockets and mortar shells fired from Gaza. So that one, I don't know how much of it that you remembered. It was really an intense situation. There was a lot of posturing on both sides. Israel was saying we need to defend ourselves, and then of course Hamas. It was said that Hamas was basically putting civilians around their munition sets, which were known targets, so that they could use the unfortunate death of innocent people as a way to garner sympathy from the rest of the world.
Right, which is typical from that.
Yes, and I will say it definitely worked to a degree. I hate to admit it, but it did, because I watched as a lot of Americans, and if you want to know where America's at, just go on Facebook. But yeah, I watched people that I knew. I mean, there were blatant sides being drawn between Americans, which, at the end of the day, we have no say. But it's very interesting to hear how some people felt that it was, the innocent Gazans were being, killed by these nasty Israelis. And of course, the reversal of it is, these innocent Israelis were trying to defend themselves against these terrorist cells of Hamas in Gaza, who were, basically setting up kill spots in the Gaza Strip. And it's hard because, like you said, it is a well-known tactic that they've used in the past. To me, when you look at human behavior, regardless of what side you're on, when you look at human behavior, anyone who surrounds themselves with innocent people, human shields, that's what they kept calling them. They had human shields. Anyone who surrounds themselves with a human shield is a pussy. That's just kind of how I feel about it.
Agreed. Yeah, totally.
And it's, you know, whether our listeners agree with me or not, I don't know, but at the end of the day, if you pull innocent lives in front of you, you're taking them hostage. Period.
I have a family member who, I'll just say, he served in the military. Did several tours of Iraq and Afghanistan in a combat situation all the time. And has told me point blank that those people in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they're Islamic, I don't want to like lump everybody into the same category. Right. However, I think the Palestinians are pretty much, I don't know what the difference is between the Palestinians, Iraqis, and Afghanistans, and that may be ignorant of me to say that, but so if I am, somebody correct us, please forgive me. But
pushthebuttonpodcast@gmail.com.
What I'm basically trying to say is that he told me point blank that they would constantly put women and children, the men would throw women and children in front of them and throw them at the troops, knowing that there was a possibility that they could get killed. And it was just for the sake of sending that message that, oh, look, Americans killed these innocent civilians again. Americans are killing women and children. Well, it's actually the Islamic militants that are putting women and children in harm's way, and they're causing the deaths of these people, in my opinion. So
no, I think you're absolutely right.
And I see the same scenario going on in Palestine.
Well, and you know, people would say, okay, look, nobody disagrees that Hamas is a terrorist organization, but the problem is they're saying the people in Gaza voted for Hamas. You know, they put them in power there. So it's kind of like again, you know, I'm trying to be sympathetic to both sides, but there is a level of you put them there.
Right.
If you don't want them, you know, then stop them. Or if you're afraid of them, then let Israel come in and help you. You know what I mean? But don't blame Israel for trying to stop terrorists from doing terrorist shit.
No.
Like digging tunnels, you know.
Not to sidetrack here. However,
are we going to talk about McDonald's again?
No, definitely not. But I like to talk about terrorism, the word terrorism.
Absolutely.
You said that Hamas is a terrorist organization. So the definition, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the definition of terrorism is the use of violent acts to frighten the people in an area as a way of trying to achieve a political goal. I'm sort of getting frustrated with this whole use of the word terrorism, and I think that anytime I think it applies only to in our psyche. It applies to people that we disagree with. When those people use violent acts. But what we did in Japan, World War II, at the end of World War II, those nuclear bombs, was an act of terrorism. We were trying to strike terror into their hearts so that they would change the way they did business.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I just wanted to throw that out there. Just everybody throws this word terrorism.
So you're saying that since
all these terrorists, every act of war is a terrorist act.
I think it's very interesting that you say that.
It's intended to strike terror into the hearts of people so that they'll change the way that they do things.
No, I like that you say that, because that makes a lot of sense. So I would venture to say that since September 11th, 2001, we started using the word terrorist as a racial slur. Would you agree with that? Mainly because we didn't have a name. We didn't have a face. I mean, we were given Osama bin Laden a few days later, But it was, I can still see, a terrorist attack on the World Trade Center, a terrorist. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think in the general sense that, I guess the sense that was intended around that scenario was like the killing of innocent civilians but again, we killed tons of innocent civilians in Japan. We've killed tons of civilians around the world, and it's all done in the hopes that the government, whichever government we're going after at the time, will change the way that they do business. So, yeah, in a way, I do think that, because we're not allowed to use other pejoratives for those races or those religions. The word terrorism was just sort of inserted. And, yeah, I do sort of agree with that.
Islamic radicalists.
We can't, and I'm just, what's that?
Islamic radical Islamists.
Yeah.
Yep. Islamic radicalists. That's the other one I hear a lot. So there you go.
And and I do believe that there are radical people that they're Islamic fundamentalists. They look at the Quran as the absolute word of God, and there is no deviation from what it says. And in it, there are all kinds of calls to violent acts.
Right.
As there are in the Bible. But I think that, I don't know, we're getting off on a wing.
Well, we're going to get back to it later. We're going to get back to it later, so we'll go down the list. Number 8.
Yep.
Number 8 on the list is immigration. Nice little hot button issue here. So immigration. It's been an issue for a long time. I mean, give us your tired, give us your poor, right? That's who we're supposed to be.
Yep.
But only if you do it the way we want you to. How come we don't have Ellis Island working the way it used to anymore?
Yeah, but if you look back to Ellis Island, it wasn't all frickin' rainbows and sunshine rainbows.
Yeah.
I mean, those people that were coming off the boat from Ireland were getting potatoes thrown at them.
Yeah.
I mean, there was so much tribalism.
What was that movie? Gangs of New York.
Gangs of New York is
such a great movie.
It's obviously it's a fictional movie, but it was based on reality.
Sure.
And if you look at the history, if you watch the special features on that DVD, it's pretty amazing. They go into some of the actual history of that area. And at that time, when all of those different people were coming into this country, they were getting, everybody hated everybody.
Yeah.
So it's not, I'm not going to say I won't say it's not a lot different, because it is different. Because we don't hate these people.
Right.
We just, I think, from the conservative standpoint, looking at it from a conservative standpoint, I think that, there's got to be, we don't just let everybody into the country. It's not just open borders and you just come waltzing in whenever you feel like, right?
Well, I mean, to play devil's advocate, there's got to be an understanding of, these are people who are fleeing a bad situation, right? And they're looking to us to be their salvation, or at least that's the immigration mindset that I've been given as I've been a kid growing up, and people from other countries trying to make it to America because they can have a better life here, better opportunity, better choices, better chances, and I do still believe that that's true. But yeah, where's the line between, yes, we'll help you, and now you're taking advantage of us? And
I will say that I do believe, and this is just from experience with people that I know who come from foreign countries who have tried to get in here and who have gotten in here and done it the quote-unquote right way. It's expensive. It's time-consuming. It's so hard to do. We don't make it easy. And should we make it easier for people to... for people who really want to come here and just work hard, earn a living, achieve the American dream, shouldn't we make it a little easier for them to do so? I mean, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in fees and processing, 10 years in paperwork. I know some Canadians that have come into this country, and they say it's just a nightmarish process to go through.
Yeah, I've heard similar stories as well, and how different it is to go from America to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Like they say, you know, to become a Canadian citizen, they say it's pretty easy.
Is it? Because I'll tell you what, having been a guy who's traveled to Canada a time or two.
Yeah, but you're not looking to
No.
defect.
Right. I'm just looking to visit there for a while. I'd say, hands down, in my experience, it is the hardest country in the world to get into. I've been all over the world. And I'll say Canada is the hardest country to get into. It's
now,
great.
why is that? Is it just their borders are really intense, or?
They're very... they've relaxed their restrictions on wrestlers, but for a long time,
wrestlers, the export and import business is wrestlers.
Yeah, right. Wrestlers and hockey players.
There you go.
And it used to be that wrestlers had such a hard time getting into Canada to work. You had to get a work visa, which is expensive, and then you have to go through a bunch of red tape. And so it was just easier to say, hey, I'm just going up to Canada to visit. And you'd send your wrestling gear to a friend's house up in Canada. And then you would just go pick it up and go to the show and wrestle it. I remember one time trying to get up into Canada. This is about 12 or 13 years ago. And, I mean, we were stopped at the border for 2 hours while they tossed our car.
Wow.
And they kept coming back and saying, like, what are you doing up here? You're taking jobs from Canadians. And that's the way they looked at it. Now they've relaxed their restrictions on wrestlers, so literally I can just go up there and say, I'm going up here to wrestle, which I just did this last weekend. But anyway, total side note.
The McRib is back. No. So off the air, we were trying to find what Obama's plan was that he just announced in November, and I found an excerpt of his actual speech that he gave. And I'm going to do an awful Obama here, but he says, now here's the thing. We expect people who live in this country to play by the rules. We expect that those who cut the line will not be unfairly rewarded. So we're going to offer the following deal. If you've been in America for more than 5 years, if you have children who are American citizens or legal residents, if you register, pass a criminal background check, and you're willing to pay your fair share in taxes, you'll be able to apply to stay in this country temporarily without fear of deportation. You can come out of the shadows and get right with the law. That's what the deal is. Now, let's be clear about what this isn't. This deal does not apply to anyone who has come to this country recently. It does not apply to anyone who might come to America illegally in the future. It does not grant citizenship or the right to stay here permanently, or offer the same benefits that citizens receive. Only Congress can do that. All we're saying is we're not going to deport you.
Right. Huh. So how do you feel about this, David?
Honestly, I It could be the one thing he's doing that I'm not terribly ticked off about.
I agree.
I like the way that he's, setting it up. It seems like he's trying to play fair. It seems like he's trying to play by the rules, which he's famously not been doing on occasion, so I think that's neat. Yeah, I mean, realistically, they're going to be here anyway, so...
Yeah, and like I just said, we make it so hard. Look, these people just want to come here. They're taking jobs in a lot of cases, and I think it's sort of racist to say they're taking all the jobs that none of the Americans want.
It's the big stereotype, but yeah,
it is. It is a big stereotype. I don't care if they're taking jobs that typical Americans don't want, or they're frickin' CEOs of companies, whatever. Like, if they're here, they're paying taxes, they're contributing to our society, and they're being productive. Why not?
Yeah, I agree. I think we as Americans have lost sight of the freedom aspect of what makes our country so great. And a lot of that freedom is you're free to shut the hell up and not worry about what somebody else is doing.
Yeah. If it neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg.
Yeah.
Have at it.
Yep. As we've said many times. So that's the immigration system.
Roger.
Number 7, and we'll go a little faster through some of these because they're a little lighter. The Ice Bucket Challenge. That was a wild thing that was going on throughout the year. Everybody and their brother was making videos. The Ice Bucket Challenge, sometimes called the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, was an activity involving dumping a bucket of ice water on someone's head to promote awareness of the disease ALS. And encourage donations to research. It went viral on social media during July through August of 2014 in the U.S., and many people participated for the ALS Association. And in the UK, many people participated for the Motor Neuron Disease Association. Also, although some individuals have opted to donate their money from the Ice Bucket Challenge to other organizations. The challenge encourages nominated participants to be filmed having a bucket of ice water poured on their heads, and then nominating others to do the same. A common stipulation is that the nominated participants only have 24 hours to comply or forfeit by way of charitable financial donation. And of course, if you hear the dogs barking in the background, I do apologize. Yeah, we both did it. I had done it. I had been called out from a friend, and I had done it, and then you called me out, so I had to do it again.
I got called out by 3 people simultaneously, so
it was neat. It was neat because your video, you called me out with Joe.
Yep.
And I think you called me out with Roddy Piper too.
I did. Yep.
So that's some good company to be in there, man.
10-4. Not bad.
I was happy to oblige. I actually have my rock band that I was in, the Slipstream. Our guitarist Chad Alvarez, his mother died of ALS, and it was an awful thing, obviously, to experience. But it was scientifically, it was a fascinating thing to see what it did to her. And I mean that with the absolute respect. We loved her. She was a wonderful woman. And she was so vibrant, so full of life when we met her. And when she was diagnosed, it was a big deal, and none of us really knew anything about it, other than it was the Lou Gehrig's disease, is what we knew it as. And to watch her, deteriorate over the years was really difficult on all of us. Least of all, Chad. And when we finally lost her, it was tragic. It was sad, but it was one of those things where to see what it did to a human body was definitely amazing. And if I'm correct, isn't that not what Stephen Hawking has?
It is. You're correct.
And he's been alive for a long time.
Yeah, and we just watched
The Theory of Everything.
The Theory of Everything, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah, I have to watch that.
I will say, I wouldn't say that it's Oscar worthy, honestly.
Sure.
It was a good movie, and I'm probably biased because I'm a big fan of Stephen Hawking.
Right, me too.
And it was just a great portrayal. The acting is phenomenal.
So you'd give it 3 Big Macs? 3 McRibs?
No, I wouldn't give it Big Macs because I hate Big Macs.
I meant McRibs, but I said Big Macs.
I would give it 3 cheddar melts.
3 cheddar melts with no onions.
Out of 5 with no onions. Yeah.
Right.
An extra cheddar.
That's so funny.
I forgot to include that earlier.
All right. So and keeping in the theme of loss, we move on to number 6. This would be the celebrity deaths of Robin Williams, Joan Rivers, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Jan Hooks, a lot of celebs. I mean, I think every year we have a loss. They always do the memorandum at the memoriam at every Oscars of all the celebrities we've lost. But this year was tragedy stricken. It wasn't just like peaceful loss. It was. Robin Williams was suicide. Joan Rivers was basically a botched surgery. With Philip Seymour Hoffman, I believe that was a drug overdose, right?
Yeah.
And Jan Hooks, I believe she was losing a medical battle, but it was wild. I know we spoke on previous episodes about the Robin Williams situation, and I was really bummed when Joan Rivers died. I really was. I thought she was really cool, and I was really bummed. Philip Seymour Hoffman, he was in the Hunger Games movies, so of course it was like we just lost him, and then we saw him in the film.
Yeah, I've never seen any of those films actually.
Well, I have a teenage daughter, so of course we have to do that.
I've read the first book, but anyway.
Wait, you read the book?
I read the first one. Yeah. And it was good. I remember thinking, so I'm a guy who hates CGI with a burning passion.
Right.
Unless it's done really well. Like, I think Jurassic Park was done very, very extremely well.
You think it still holds up today?
I do. I just watched it recently, and I was like, that still holds up to me.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job.
The first Iron Man holds up. I think the first Transformers holds up. But there are just so many movies out there that are just terrible.
Yeah.
And to me, it looks like Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Right.
Whereas, like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it was intended to be kind of campy and, you're in this cartoon world, sort of.
Right.
Whereas this stuff is intended to look like, the intention is to make it look like it's real. Anyway. Yeah.
Number 5, the Russian military intervention in Ukraine. So let's see. Here's the long gist of it. In late February of 2014, Russia began to send unmarked troops and military equipment into Ukraine in what has been termed a stealth invasion. Following the February 2014 Ukrainian Revolution and Euromaidan movement, including the contentious ouster of President Viktor Yanukovych. I think I said that pretty good. Starting with the 2014 Crimean crisis, soldiers of ambiguous affiliation began to take control of strategic positions and infrastructure within the Ukrainian territory of Crimea, which Russia then annexed. London-based military experts and the U.S. State Department said that the soldiers were likely Russian special forces, possibly including Spetsnaz commandos and airborne units. Russia initially insisted that Russian forces stationed in the area were not involved, and Russian President Vladimir Putin admitted in April that Russian troops had been active in Crimea and said that this had laid the groundwork for the Crimean status referendum. After the annexation of Crimea, anti-Euromaidan demonstrations by pro-Russian and anti-government groups, which were taking place in the Donbass area of Ukraine since early March escalated by mid-April into an armed conflict between the separatist forces of the self-declared Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, DPR and LPR respectively, and the Ukrainian government. As this armed insurgency spread across the Donbass, Malaysian Airlines Flight 17, keep that in mind, was shot down over the conflict zone on July 17th near Torez in Donetsk Oblast. In August, Russian military vehicles have openly crossed the border in several locations of Donetsk Oblast, including Mariupol, massing over 40,000 army units near the Ukrainian border. Despite the United States government accusing Russia of supplying the rebels with its military gear and infantry, Russia has distanced itself from such allegations ever since the beginning of the intervention, and has eventually kept denying them. Russian soldiers captured in Ukraine, comments made by rebel leaders such as a gentleman's name I'm not going to pronounce. The Russian soldiers in the region were on holiday, and statements such as that of the head of the Russian Union of Committees of Soldiers, Mothers Valentia Menikova, all indicated that Russian service personnel and fighting in Ukraine. In the aftermath of heavy defeat of Ukrainian forces in early September, for example, when a column of 70 armored vehicles and hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers were ambushed and shelled as they fled from encirclement in the town of Lilovaysk, it was evident Russia had sent soldiers and armor across the border, with locals acknowledging the role of Putin and Russian soldiers in effecting a reversal of fortunes. Regular Russian soldiers then quickly disappeared from view. The representatives of Ukraine, Russia, and the rebel leaders signed the Minsk Protocol, a 12-point agreement that implemented a ceasefire. On September 10th, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko said most of the Russian forces had withdrawn from Ukrainian territory, and that this heightened the chances for a lasting ceasefire in the southeast. On September 13th, however, it was reported Russia had sent a convoy of aid into eastern Ukraine without inspection by Ukraine, stating that this convoy was part of the ceasefire agreement. NATO said Russian forces were still operating in Ukraine in unknown numbers, repositioning to bring great pressure on Mariupol. In November 2014, the Ukrainian military reported intensive movement of troops and equipment from Russia into the separatist-controlled parts of eastern Ukraine. An Associated Press reported 80 unmarked military vehicles on the move in rebel-controlled areas of eastern Ukraine. 3 separate columns were seen, one near the main separatist stronghold of Donetsk, and 2 outside the town of Snishiny. Several of the trucks were seen to be carrying troops. An OSCE special monitoring mission observed convoys of heavy weapons and tanks without insignia. According to an independent assessment provided by the Daily Beast, there were as many as 7,000 Russian troops inside Ukraine in early November 2014, with between 40,000 and 50,000 at the country's eastern border. OSCE monitors further observed vehicles apparently used to transport soldiers' bodies crossing the Russian-Ukrainian border. In one case, a vehicle marked with Russia's military code for soldiers killed in action crossed from Russia into Ukraine on November 11th of 2014 and later returned. Igor Girkin, meanwhile, formerly the military commander of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic before his recall to Russia, described how he had helped instigate the insurrection and how active-duty Russian soldiers later intervened to save the rebels from defeat. Several members of the international community and organizations such as Amnesty International have criticized Russia for its actions in post-revolutionary Ukraine and condemned Russia, accusing it of breaking international law and violating Ukrainian sovereignty. Ukrainian and Western military officials described Russian incursions as a stealth invasion, and many countries implemented economic sanctions against Russia or Russian individuals or companies, to which Russia responded in kind. The Kremlin has tried to systematically intimidate and silence human rights workers, who have raised questions about Russian soldiers' deaths in the conflict. According to the soldiers' rights advocates, the families of Russian soldiers killed, having been sent to Ukraine, have been told to keep silent. And some families say that they have not received the various compensations that they are entitled to after a breadwinner in military service has been killed. This obviously has been going on up until, or has been reported up until November of last year. So yeah, whatever's happening is still building.
Whew.
That's some heavy duty stuff.
Definitely. I'm just going to be honest here and say that I don't know enough about this situation to make an informed, educated decision on how I feel about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there was definitely a lot of the sentiment I heard from opposition saying that there was a lot of Russian-speaking native Russian people there in Crimea.
Like 50%.
Yeah. Hence,
50% of the people in well, I don't know Crimea, but in the Ukraine.
Well, Crimea was a part of Ukraine.
Okay.
Which is now no longer part of Ukraine.
So 50% of the people there are Russian.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I would assume more than 50% because they had a vote and they said, yep, we want to be Russian. So they are. But there are rules, and it seems to me like the rules were broken. And it seems to me like, you know, the UN and international organizations all agreed that that was not played by the rules. And where a lot of controversy comes into play, especially with Obama, is that he was making, you know, threats, but then failed to do anything about it. You know, you can't do this sort of thing. You know, we're gonna stop you, and then, you know, we'll just put sanctions on you.
Right.
And so a lot of people were pissed about that.
And honestly, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
How far can he push until you're willing to do something for real?
Exactly.
I mean, exactly. If you go to war with Russia?
Yeah, that's the real question.
Just a thought.
And then again, you know, when you're trying to stay out of people's way, at what point does it become another Hitler situation? If that's what Russia's doing, if it's basically reclaiming land. You know what I mean?
Well,
expansion.
But if you look at the course of history throughout the world, every single country in this world has at one point been overtaken by another country. You know, it's just the way it is. I mean, just because it happens to be, you know, we don't hear about it a lot nowadays because lines seem to be drawn permanently.
Right.
But I don't know. Like, it sort of goes back to that question of like, who are we to say, right?
Your libertarian flag is showing.
Sort of. Yeah.
I'm with you.
Oh, at some point you got to let people just let the people. Honestly, my opinion about Iraq, and I guess we're gonna get to this, but it's just, you know, as shitty as it is, let them figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to change their opinions.
And another group of people's opinions that haven't changed is number 4, and that is the race protests and rioting of the apparent, I would assume, the degradation of relations between authority, government, and citizens of urban areas. We have famously Ferguson, Missouri, Michael Brown. The shooting of Michael Brown occurred on August 9th, 2014 in Ferguson, Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis. Brown, an 18-year-old black man, was fatally shot by Darren Wilson, 28, a white Ferguson police officer. The disputed circumstances of the shooting and the resultant protests and civil unrest received considerable attention in the United States and abroad, and sparked a vigorous debate about law enforcement's relationship with African Americans and police use of force doctrine in Missouri and nationwide. I don't want to gloss over this. It's a big deal, but there's others to talk about as well. the July 17th death of 43-year-old Eric Garner at the hands of a New York police officer was captured on a cell phone video, with Garner repeatedly saying, as police wrestled him to the ground using a chokehold, "I can't breathe." The shooting of Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old African-American boy, occurring on November 22nd, 2014 in Cleveland, Ohio. Two police officers, 26-year-old Timothy Lohman and 46-year-old Frank Garnbach, responded after receiving a police dispatch call describing a young black male brandishing a gun at people in a city park. A caller reported that a juvenile was pointing a pistol at random people in the Kudell Recreation Center and stated twice that the gun was probably fake. The officers reported that upon their arrival, Rice reached towards a gun in his waistband. Lohman fired 2 shots within 2 seconds of arriving on the scene, hitting Rice once in the torso. Rice's gun was later found to be an airsoft replica, though lacking the orange safety feature signifying that the gun is not real. Rice died on the day after shooting. His death has been ruled a homicide by the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner. These are all tough things, obviously, because there's always going to be high emotions on all sides of the fence. There's people who are, you obviously are going to have people who feel like anybody who gets shot, people are going to instantly have sympathy for that person because their life has been taken from them, and I completely understand that.
Right.
And then at the same token, there's also going to be people who, whether it's racism, whether it's fear, some would argue that's the same thing, but there are some who look at that and go, well, if person A had not been behaving in a specific way, then maybe person B wouldn't have responded in a certain way. You know what I mean? And there is some of that to be said, but it doesn't change the fact that that life has been lost, and that's where it gets real difficult and real touchy. And obviously, the race issue is a major one, major enough that it's definitely going to be an episode all in itself that we'll touch on. But the whole thing about police, use of force, excessive force, and whatnot, I gotta say, again, I feel bad about the Eric Garner case specifically because it's on video. We got it on video, and it went viral, and that's
the Tamir Rice thing is on video too.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can. It's ridiculous when you watch it.
But that's kind of the point. I like that we're catching the actions of people who otherwise would have gone unmonitored.
Yeah, but the thing is that in those cases, I think in the Eric Garner and Tamir Rice scenarios, we have these people on videotape. To me, it's pretty cut and dry in those cases.
Yeah.
The cops were wrong. In my humble opinion, the cops were wrong in those cases. The way that they responded, the way that they reacted, and the obvious outcome of those scenarios.
Right.
What irritates me about this is the disproportionate outrage about these cases. You have the case, Michael Brown, this guy attacked a police officer who tried to pull him over, who tried to question him. He attacked the police officer. He attempted to pull the police officer's gun away from him. What do you suppose Michael Brown was going to do if he got that gun away from that police officer? Was he going to play patty cake?
Right.
Was he going to, was he going to pull the magazine out and eject all the rounds?
Well,
out of the chamber?
Yeah,
was he going to do that?
I was going to say, and then at that point, if that is the case, then I think, is it fair to assume that there's no reasonable expectation of harm at that point?
I do. If I'm a police officer and somebody is trying to pull my weapon away from me, and it continues to fight me, I'm going to pull my gun and shoot him.
Right.
And when I shoot him a couple times, and he then turns around and charges back at me. Because in a lot of cases, what people don't realize is, you see in the movies, you see somebody gets shot and they fly backwards 20 feet. And
right.
blood flies out in all directions. in a lot of cases, I've seen video of people getting shot in the heart, and they don't even know that they've been shot in the heart.
They keep coming, right?
They keep coming. And so you shot this guy a few times, and now he turns around and he charges you again. What do you do?
Yeah.
Do you pull out your taser? Do you pull out your pepper spray? Your baton? Do you use verbal judo? I don't think so. I don't think so, and I don't mean to sort of gloss over this and make light of it. But in this scenario, I believe that the police officer was justified. According to the police report, according to the autopsy. However, when you look at the Eric Garner case, I mean, you've got it on videotape. You've got a guy who's just, he might be resisting arrest, but he wasn't resisting arrest in a way that was harmful to the police officers. He was resisting peacefully. And in those scenarios, if the New York Police Department is going to say that those police officers responded appropriately, then we need to revisit their procedures. We need to reevaluate their procedures, I believe. And the same case goes with the Tamir Rice thing. This kid, first of all, as you stated, the person who called dispatch said, I think the gun is fake. Now, it's been stated that dispatch never reported that to the police officers. So they just said, there's somebody in the park with a gun.
Sure.
But in the videotape, you see these cops pull up. As far as I can tell from watching the videotape, he is the only person in the park, period.
Okay.
And these cops pull up on him frickin' Miami Vice style.
Yeah.
They literally pull within 5 feet of where he's standing. The cop gets out and just shoots him dead. Now, in that scenario, don't you think it would have been appropriate for a cop to maybe, I don't know, stop his vehicle 50 yards away?
Right.
Open the doors, get down, go ahead, pull your weapon, aim it at the suspect, get out your bullhorn that you have that's equipped in every police vehicle, and say, you, put your weapon down, you know, and then start ordering him and sort of figure out the scenario there. Is it necessary to drive up Miami Vice style? I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And in that case,
that you say
again,
that because
in that case again, the Tamir Rice case, I don't know, it's the police commission or the court system or whatever, basically he said the cops acted accordingly. That they were okay with, they were justified in what they did, which I think is ridiculous. And I think that overall, police procedures need to be revisited. Do we need to be rolling up on people like we are?
Yeah. I remember being a kid, growing up where I did, and man, if you were at the park past 10 o'clock at night, man, they would drive through the park on the grass, and I'd be like, seriously? like seriously, like you watch too many cop shows, man. But, you know, it is what it is. I agree with you. I think the police procedures need to be revisited. And if anything, if all these stories constitute a revisit of, you know, potential excessive force being used and how our police handle themselves, then at the very least, the bitter least, these young men would not have died in vain. That's how I feel about it. But that's only if something gets done.
And, you know, here's the, again, I don't mean to repeat myself, but the disparity between the outrage between these scenarios is it's just ridiculous to me. Why is Al Sharpton not on the ground talking about Tamir Rice?
Huh.
or Eric Garner?
Yeah, I don't know.
Why was it Michael Brown? Why was it the case of Michael Brown? It was, and to me, it's almost like, you know what? We made a decision, and we can never say that we're wrong. We are not able to say, you know what? Maybe we jumped the gun on this thing. We were wrong. I don't know. I just think there's so many cases out there where the outrage is appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, Tamir Rice, that outrage I think is appropriate. The Eric Garner case I think is fairly appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I do.
And I would like to point people to another podcast, Dan Carlin's Common Sense, which is a phenomenal podcast. And he talks about this scenario in episode 285. It's called Torturing Our Values, where he talks about this whole thing. And one interesting thing that he brings up about the Michael Brown case is that in the case of the indictment, right?
Okay.
He basically lays out the scenario. He says that in most cases, whoever the prosecutor wants to indict, the jury ends up indicting. The grand jury ends up indicting, whatever.
And I don't know what the statistics have to do with that per se, but
basically what he says is that, look, in a lot of these cases, it's open and shut. And I believe that when given all the evidence, the Michael Brown case is open and shut.
Sure.
But it starts to look like you're trying to cover things up when you don't allow this process
the public forum, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm down with that. And like I said, we'll definitely do a specific episode on racism or just race because it needs to be addressed. And who better to address it than you and I?
Yeah. Push people's buttons.
Number 3, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, aka ISIL, is an Islamist rebel group that controls territory in Iraq and Syria and also operates in eastern Libya, the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt, and other areas of the Middle East and Southeast Asia. The group's Arabic name is translated as Ad-Dawl Islamia fi Iraq Wash Sham. Leading to the Arabic acronym Daesh or Daesh. The name is also commonly translated as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or Islamic State of Iraq and Al-Sham, and abbreviated ISIS. In June 2014, the group renamed itself the Islamic State, IS, but the new name has been widely criticized and condemned, with the UN, various governments, and mainstream Muslim groups refusing to use it. So it's basically ISIS is basically the new face of the new evil, right? Is that what we're taking from the media at this point?
Yeah, I would say so.
Did ISIS? I can't remember now with this. Not that it was last year, but it was this year. But the Charlie Hebdo attacks, was that ISIS who claimed responsibility, or was that Al Qaeda? It was one of the two.
I'm not sure.
We'll cover that next January.
Yeah.
But yeah, ISIS is the new terror cell, the new face of, it used to be the Taliban, then it was, all a derivative of Al Qaeda. Now we have ISIS, and what was basically ISIS was basically a group that after Allied forces withdrew from Iraq, they basically swooped in and reclaimed a lot of the territory that the Allied forces secured. To me personally, I was highly offended by it. I mean, I felt that it was a great offense. It really was.
In what way?
Well, I mean, our American soldiers, and not just America, I was calling them Allied forces because it was, Europe and Australia and other countries, Ireland were involved too, but we had American soldiers, American boys, who served their country, went there and fought heinously to secure the city of Baghdad and Mosul and Fallujah and all these city names that we learned about during this recent basically push towards Baghdad that we had. And to know that those were the cities that were falling again to ISIS, to me felt like it was a slap in the face of all the effort that was put into securing those areas. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So when I heard the news, I was very upset. And I won't say where I placed my blame, but people with a good head on their shoulders can probably figure that out. But I was very upset about the whole scenario, and I feel like it could have been easily avoided.
Well, but again, no.
But do we belong there? Right, exactly.
Do we belong there? It's been said that this problem stems from a resolution that was reached after World War I, where Great Britain and France drew the lines of the countries, basically.
Right.
Said, like, these groups that hate each other in Iraq, you've got the Kurds, you've got the Sunnis, and you've got the Shias, and they hate each other. They don't want to live together. They want to be separate. You're all going to live together, and you're going to deal with it. Boom. Here you go.
Right.
And this has been a problem forever, and I think there was a three-state solution during the first Gulf War, or maybe it was the second Gulf War. I think it was the second Gulf War. There was a three-state solution where they said, like, let's split Iraq into 3 states and let these different groups just sort of rule.
I vaguely remember that, yeah.
Right. And no, we can't do that. Well, you know what? You're not gonna bomb your ideology into these people. You're not gonna bomb education into these people. And so what you get is these groups that they don't want to live together. And one group has taken the lead, and unfortunately they're going around and they're doing what we view as horrible things, and they are horrible. I don't mean to mince words. They are horrible acts that they're committing, but and I've heard it argued that we need to let these people go. We need to let these people figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
And this ISIS will, they'll push as far north as they can until they meet an equal or opposing force. And then they'll stop. And east, west, north, south. You know what I mean? East, west, north, south. And that's where the lines will be drawn. And then you will have peace. Until that time comes, you're going to have these people constantly trying to battle each other. So, I don't know that, I hear people say that, we never should have pulled out. Well, we weren't willing to do the hard work, and I said this before. We weren't willing to do the things that were necessary to make permanent change in that region. Shock and awe lasted for a few weeks,
right,
or a few days, and then people started saying, well, but we're harming innocent civilians. And to me, unfortunately, if you make that decision, you go to war, you're going to harm innocent civilians.
Yeah.
That's part of war. I don't know. You get to the point where you go house to house and you don't know who's your enemy, who's your ally. And I feel like that's sort of where we got to with Iraq. And there was no alternative but to pull out.
Right.
So
Interesting stuff. Very controversial. That's why it's on the list.
Yep.
What else is on the list? Number 2. Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 was a scheduled international passenger flight that disappeared on Saturday, March 8th, 2014, while flying home from Kuala Lumpur International Airport near Kuala Lumpur. Malaysia, to Beijing Capital International Airport in Beijing, China. Flight 370 last made voice contact with air traffic control at 1:19 Malaysian time when it was over the South China Sea, less than an hour after takeoff, and the aircraft disappeared from air traffic controllers' radar screens. Malaysian military radar continued to track Flight 370 as it deviated from its planned flight path and crossed the Malay Peninsula. Flight 370 left the range of Malaysian military radar while over the Andaman Sea, 200 nautical miles northwest of Penang in northwestern Malaysia. Neither the crew nor the aircraft's communication systems relayed a distress signal, indications of bad weather or technical problems before the aircraft vanished. The aircraft, a Boeing 777-200ER, was carrying 12 Malaysian crew members and 227 passengers from 15 different nations. The aircraft has yet to be found. So, yeah, there's a lot of controversy about this because, especially now more than ever, it's one of 3 Malaysian airlines in 12 months to have had catastrophe. One was, obviously this one, another Malaysian flight was shot down accidentally by the Russian forces over Ukraine.
Accidentally.
And then we just had the Air Asia, which was out of the same airport, the Kuala Lumpur, I believe, that we found easily within 2 weeks. And the reason we knew where it was, we couldn't even get to it because of the weather, but once the weather lifted, we went and got it. So it's like, I don't know, man. I don't want to turn this into a Jesse Ventura show, but there is a level of how hard is it to find a damn plane when you know where it's at? You know what I mean?
Well, but again, there is the possibility of mechanical error.
Absolutely.
And this is not the first flight to have gone missing.
Nope. Air France was gone for about a year before they found it.
I mean, there have been many flights before. Aren't there a bunch of flights that disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle, supposedly, that have never been found?
Yes, but that's
I don't know if that's just conspiracy theory, if that's just BS.
Yeah, that's because it's a black hole that takes you to an alternate dimension where all you can eat is McRibs.
Where there are nothing but Langoliers.
Langoliers and patty melts. With extra onions.
That wouldn't be a... Whoa, wait.
See, I flipped the script on you.
You did. I was going to say, that didn't sound like a bad place.
It's the flight is still missing. They to me it was the biggest miscommunicative situation I'd ever seen. They're over here. No, we think it's over here. No, we think it's back over here. No, we think it's over here. It's like, really? You're literally wasting time.
Yeah.
And how do we not have the technology to keep track of that? And then, there were satellites that was pinging off of it, so it could be anywhere within this area. And when you triangulate it, it should be over somewhere here. But we've searched there, and there's nothing there.
Well, and I remember thinking, okay, we found out that this guy had a simulator in his house.
Sure. Which is not unheard of for a pilot who's an aviation enthusiast, I would think.
Yeah?
You don't think?
Really? You think most pilots have simulators in their house?
Okay, first of all, and I'm not... I get it. I could get a flight simulator and put it on my machine. I've got 2 monitors. This guy had 3. I mean, and I know gamers who do 3 monitors.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I mean, that's a valid point. Again, I'm not saying it's not true, but it's also a probability that he was just an enthusiast, an aviation enthusiast who...
Sure.
Maybe he was a gamer on the side and he had a cool flight simulation program where you could... I mean, I like to play flight simulators. It doesn't mean I'm a terrorist or anything like that.
Yet. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
So either way, the flight is still at large.
Then the transponder was turned off at a certain, or stopped responding at a certain point, and generally we think that if a transponder stops working, it's because somebody turned it off, not because of mechanical error. But it is possible that mechanical error occurred.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what they assumed from their investigation was that it was human interference, is what they were calling it. But see, here's the thing, and it's not to say that a transponder couldn't short out.
Right.
But I guess it's more likely that if the transponder simply shorted out, then there's no reason why it wouldn't have landed at its destination.
Well, it's also more likely that you won't win the lottery, but it's possible.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. Like, if we're going under the assumption that the transponder just simply shorted out and that's why it disappeared from radar, it wasn't intentional, it was literally nothing, no human interaction at all, then if that was the only thing that went wrong, then they would have landed because that was the only thing that went wrong. Do you know what I mean? So the fact that it stopped giving a signal and then the plane never reached its destination then implies that it was manually disconnected. Or the fact that here's the hard part. What we absolutely know factually is that the transponder stopped giving a signal at a certain point. I'm not quite sure why they weren't searching to see where it stopped giving the signal, because other information from other third-party sources was saying, well, we have evidence that it was pinging over here or over there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the absolute factual information, like from when you can see it to when you can't see it, was when the transponder stopped. So what if that itself was the crash? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But nobody's looking there.
Or have we just not been informed that they're looking there?
Well, sure. And that's totally fair. Totally fair.
Yeah. But, okay, if we're to assume that somebody turned this transponder off, okay, let's just play devil's advocate.
Absolutely.
Somebody turned the transponder off. The pilot turned that transponder off and then diverted course. I highly doubt, if that's the case, that pilot just meant to then crash that plane into the ocean. What mess? Obviously in that scenario, like, it seems to me you're trying to send a message or you're trying to commit an act of terrorism, quote unquote, right?
Right.
And what message does your act of terrorism send if you just crash the plane in the ocean?
And no one claims responsibility.
Right. Then what? So, I don't know. I honestly, the fact that it was never recovered, and the fact that there were, they say, like 7 transponders on that plane, right?
Right.
There were 7 different, I guess, devices that send out a signal that you can pick up. And none of them were ever recovered, and none of them were ever heard from.
And allegedly, in some cases, none of them were even operational. Like there was either like the Boeing or I think it was Chrysler or whatever the company is that made the engines. Supposedly, there's like a GPS tracking system in those engines, but they didn't purchase the tracking plan, so they weren't monitoring them or something weird like that. Like, there's so many different things. There's multiple redundancies, as there should be for an airplane. But hey, I mean, it took decades of aeronautics before people bum rushed a cockpit before they decided maybe it's a good idea to put a lock on a cockpit.
Yeah, right.
So who knows what's going to happen? Maybe we'll start adding some mandatory GPS tracking or something. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely. And again, as a skeptic, overall, I have to say, at first I was like, this plane landed in
some minute island, and it's being fitted with weapons, and it's going to come attack Israel or America or Russia or whatever.
Right, but when I sort of think about things.
You mean at the end of the day?
At the end of the day, when I'm tired of thinking, again, in these conspiracy theories, you have to have an extraordinary amount of people who are in on the conspiracy, who never say anything. I mean, you look at the case of, look at a murder case that involves two people. Generally, one of those two people are going to sing. They're going to say something about it.
Right.
Now, you're going to involve hundreds of people into this conspiracy.
Now, I'm going to tell you.
I don't know. I just think it's impossible.
I was listening to, what's the name of Jesse's show? We the People, I think it's called. We the People.
But does he have a podcast?
He sure does. And it's very much.
Son of a bitch. Everybody's got a frick.
I know. It's very much what you'd expect from Jesse Ventura. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of Jesse. I've always been a fan of his in-ring work and his acting and his politics. Whatever. He knows what he wants and he goes for it. God bless him.
Yeah.
But when he says, there's people who say, it's too many people to have a conspiracy. How could you keep that many people quiet? And he said, well, come on. If you're killing the people, then that's how they're going to stay quiet. Okay, Jesse.
Okay, but are you killing everybody?
That's why it's a conspiracy. If people are getting killed, then of course they're going to keep it quiet. So you can have that.
Oh, Jesse.
We love you, Jesse. We'd love to have you on the show.
Oh, Alex.
Number one.
Alex Jones, by the way.
Black helicopters, man. Number one.
Globalist eugenicists are
prisonplanet.com, let me tell you.
Yes.
Okay, number one. The top 10, all the way down to number one. Most controversial issue in the United States in the year 2014 was the Ebola virus.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
I know.
You gotta be shitting me.
Well, to be fair, there were some people who were extremely terrified of it and people who were absolutely not.
How many people died from the Ebola virus in America?
Well,
how many people?
Let's go through
America from the Ebola virus.
Let's go through
Just asking a question. How many people in America died from the Ebola virus?
Okay. Ebola.
Three? Two?
Well, how many Americans or how many people died in America?
No. Americans.
I don't know. What was it? It was the one doctor. Oh, was he an American?
Let's say 10, and I think that's extraordinarily high. I think that's... how many people died from cigarette inhalation in America last year?
Right.
How many people died from alcohol abuse last year?
So your philosophy, Ken, is that Ebola is something that we don't have to worry about, right?
I don't say it's nothing that we have to worry about. I think that all of these different things that we're presented with are we should take seriously to a degree. But I just think that you get these people who capitalize on the sky is falling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And the sky never falls. And
well, let me...
And there have been people saying that the sky is falling since...
the dawn of man.
Dawn of man.
So let's just, for posterity and continuity, let's go through this. Ebola is a rare and deadly disease caused by an infection with a strain of the Ebola virus. The 2014 Ebola epidemic is the largest in history, affecting multiple countries in West Africa. However, the risk of an Ebola outbreak affecting multiple people in the United States is very low. Ebola is spread through direct contact with blood and bloody fluids of a person already showing symptoms of Ebola. Ebola is not spread through the air, water, food, or mosquitoes. This is what we know. However, just a few hours ago today, MSNBC and NBCNews.com released a story that says the Ebola virus strain that's killed more than 8,600 people in West Africa is mutating. Yes, it's mutating in a way that could make experimental drugs less likely to help. Researchers reported Tuesday, which happens to be today, they said that they'd found 10 new mutations that might interfere with how 3 of the most advanced drugs work against Ebola. The drugs, including the experimental ZMapp given to several Ebola survivors, should be tested against the current strain, the researchers said. Based on our findings, the virus has changed and is continuing to change, said Jeffrey Kugelman, a viral geneticist at the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, USAMRIID, for those of you who like acronyms, who led the research published in the journal MBio. All viruses mutate, some faster than others. Ebola changes slightly from outbreak to outbreak, and the more people or animals infected, the more likely the virus is to mutate as it replicates inside a living body. The virus that sickened more than 21,000 people in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone is called Ebola virus Macono variant. It's similar to the strains that have caused outbreaks in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, formerly Zaire. Kugelman's team, with researchers at Harvard University, which so you know it's going to be awesome, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, also known as MIT for you acronym fans, compared the genetic sequence of the Ebola Macono samples to Ebola Zaire and found 600 different mutations. It sounds like a lot, but may not mean much for treatment. However, they found 10 mutations that affect the parts of the virus targeted by treatments including ZMapp, a drug made by the Canadian company Tecmira, and one called AVI-7537, being developed by Massachusetts-based Sarepta Therapeutics. All these drugs are specifically designed to attack Ebola based on its physical structure. ZMapp, made by San Diego-based MAP Biotherapeutics, consists of 3 genetically engineered immune system proteins called monoclonal antibodies. They are designed to recognize and neutralize Ebola. Obviously, this story goes on and on and on and on and on about how, yes, we're not in any danger, but, oh, wait, it's mutating now, and our best medicine may not work. Didn't say doesn't work, it said may not work. I think it's The Walking Dead, man.
Yeah. It's just, the sky is falling, the sky is falling,
yeah.
The sky is falling.
Well, those were our top 10 most controversial issues in the news in the year 2014.
Let me just say that I want to say I don't believe that we should just gloss over those things. And I think that we should take precautions just in case.
Yeah.
But don't stop living your lives. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I think that a lot of these naysayers out there, a lot of these people that push these agendas, these issues, these sky is falling kind of scenarios. Want you to just
you mean mass media?
We need to stop living our lives. Yeah. And you need to, we need doomsday preppers and these kinds of things. Look, I think you should prepare for worst case scenarios. I really do. Mm-hmm. I think that you should have a rainy day fund. I think that you should have a backup plan just in case. Always. But don't stop living your lives because, I don't know, everybody said that this Ebola thing was going to kill everybody in America. And I don't think how many people have died?
Yeah, I don't think I was under the assumption that it was going to kill everybody in America, but I think it was pretty ridiculous on how lackadaisical our ability to protect ourselves against the infection was becoming.
But only 3 people died from it.
But my point is and again, it's not the Ebola virus itself. It could be anything. It could be the cold, the common cold, the flu. That's the whole point. Is I don't like how, again, as I'm sure you would agree, how uneducated we were. You know, wash your hands before you eat, type of a thing.
I agree.
So do you agree, listeners? Send us an email, pushthebuttonpodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. Were there more controversial issues than that last year? Did we miss them? Again, we take no credit. We copied them from CNN and we commentated because that's what we do. Yeah. Yeah, I think we've covered the entire 2014.
Yeah, I think we've covered everything and then some.
But we have a whole 2015 to look forward to, and we're still in January, so we have a lot to go.
Whew. And I'm sure there will be tons of crazy stuff that will happen in 2015.
So keep being goofy, world, so we have stuff to talk about.
Please. Thank you.
Alrighty, from Push the Button Podcast. Don't forget to give us a 5-star review on iTunes and talk us up on Facebook and Twitter because we're awesome. I am your host, David Vox Mullen.
And I'm your other host, Mr. Anderson. Anderson saying, freaking don't get hot.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Mr. Anderson.
Don't push it.